本期视频是斯蒂芬罗奇近日接受彭博社访谈的节选。斯蒂芬是耶鲁大学法学院高级研究员，摩根士丹利前亚洲区主席。他在访谈中表达了自己对美国对华贸易政策的担忧，以及他对中国经济的最新评估。我们看看他是怎么说的吧。
I want to get to your latest column about how you think U.S. trade policy is incoherent. What do you think is wrong about it right now?
Well, I don't think we know what we're trying to accomplish with trade policy. Are we trying to reduce the trade deficit? Are we trying to stop Chinese technology? Are we trying to protect U.S. industries in green technology products who do not have a comparative advantage, who do not have the scale? Are we trying to contain China geostrategically? What are we trying to do? I mean, we're multiple goals with one instrument, and I would say, and I've written books about this, that we have a huge trade problem. We have deficits with over 105 countries. We're going after the biggest one, but that leaves 100 plus countries that still have significant imbalances with the United States. And as we squeeze the Chinese piece, that portion of our deficit goes to them, and they're higher cost producers, and that taxes American consumers. So what are we doing with trade policy? Do we actually have a clue, a strategy as to what we're trying to accomplish?
Politicians, they see the word trade deficit and they start running and they start trying to put a positive spin. As an economist, do you think having a trade deficit is a bad thing?
For politicians most of whom have never taken an economics class, trade deficits are bad. But the point that I have made to our friendly politicians in Washington is that the trade deficit really is on their backs. By running massive budget deficits. Right. The United States is suppressing domestic saving, forcing us to import surplus savings from abroad, and running massive trade deficits to attract the capital. So you want to fix the trade deficit, Mr. Politician, look in the mirror and fix the budget deficit in the United States.
Stephen, while we're talking the intersection of politics and business, obviously, let me take the devil's advocate on your claim about essentially a forever war. The Biden administration, they tell me essentially, in economics and in trade, the Biden administration officials that I've spoken to say, listen, it's only a small proportion of products that are being tariffed right now of the overall two-way trade between China and the United States. EVs, even at 25%, there was no access to EVs, Chinese EVs in the United States. Syringes and surgical gloves, the Chinese have the scale already to outcompete any product that the United States might make. And that's not going to necessarily spur domestic industry. And so it goes back to the question is this just for political show? Because Donald Trump and the Republicans are talking 60% across the board on all Chinese tariffs.
Well, there's no mistaking, Steve, the political motives here. Is we're certainly moving into the most intense part of our rather insane political season. But the new tariffs that were just announced a couple of weeks ago cover $18 billion of items. But how about the old tariffs that are still in place, that were put in place by President Trump 2018 to 2019, that covers something like $350 billion of imports from China. They are still in place. So we're throwing bad money after bad money, and the level of tariffs, I think the latest numbers are roughly 20% tariffs on all Chinese products versus pre-trade war of a number closer to 3%. So I take no comfort from the fact that these latest tariffs on Chinese imports are small. The overall volume of tariffed imports is high and likely to rise further.
What about what the U.S. says about overcapacity? I mean, are those claims, you think, overdone? I mean, the Chinese obviously have been subsidizing and supporting the production of clean tech and the like.
They're totally overdone. I mean, First of all, and I think you reported on this when you mentioned my comments in Beijing on Friday, when it comes to green technology goods, in today's world that is getting hugely challenged by climate change, there is no such thing as excess capacity. We need all the capacity we can get to move away from carbon to alternatives. Shame on us if we don't have the capacity to make those goods at home. But in the meantime, let's take advantage of somebody who has the technology, who has the scale, who has the product, who can help make global climate, certainly won't end climate change, but help make global climate more tolerable in the meantime.
Right. What do you think the fix should be, though? Yeah. So what should a U.S. president, that's party agnostic question, what should a U.S. president do to either manage or spin the deficit problem, whether that's trade or budget?
Look, far be it for me to have a solution to a problem that has spanned both parties over decades. I mean, I've looked at the budget numbers, since I think 1962, according to the Congressional Budget Office. We've been in deficit every year except two. So there's no easy fix. It's politically expedient for politicians to keep pumping more money into their constituencies, and they never lose by doing it. They never lose their position in office, so they're not going to stop, and they are unaware or unwilling to accept the consequences for their irresponsible fiscal policy. And trade is one of them, a big one.
Stephen, you just came back from Beijing. What's the mood on the street that you got from them? I mean, you've taught lessons at Yale University about the property crisis in Japan that lasted nearly 2 decades. You see parallels there, and just at the beginning. But there's also some despair, I would assume, among small to medium-sized enterprises and young people. What did you find?
I found a Beijing that really didn't have much of the spark that I had been accustomed to over my many years of traveling there, Steve, especially, as you said, amongst private sector entrepreneurs and students, not just undergraduate students, but graduate students completing PhDs in leading Chinese universities with not much hope for job prospects post-PhD. I think the mood was one, certainly the best I could call it was a mood of grim resignation, and you could go further, but I don't care to really do that.
Fixable? Either so cyclical, or is there a structural component here that, and if it's structural, do you think they have the toolkit to manage that structural shift?
It's a big structural issue, and what my work shows, and actually what President Xi has elliptically said recently, is that because the population is declining, the workforce is declining, China needs to boost productivity, even cited a term I'm sure he knows nothing about, total factor productivity, as a potential offset, and China's new approach to focusing on new productive forces is aimed at doing that, and there are consequences of that for the rest of the world that we're pushing back on, which is unfortunate. China needs a lot of help in grappling with its structural issues, and it would be not only in China's best interest, but for the rest of this region as well as the world, for them to succeed.